Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Iain McNay and today we have our guest in the studio, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Hi Joe.
Pleasure to be with you, Ian.
And we're going to talk about the science of changing your mind. And Joe has a book out, I'll hold up here, Evolve Your Brain. And he has another book which we'll talk about later, which will be coming out probably next May in the UK. And Joe was also very involved and appeared in the film What the Bleep Do We Know, which I know quite a few people did watch in Europe. So Joe, the whole story seemed to start, reading your book, when actually you had a very serious accident. You're on a triathlon race in, I think, California, when you were 26 years old. And just take us through that day, because already the day started in a kind of a bit of a unclear way, didn't it?
Yeah, I was training for months with two other guys in Southern California, and we were going to do a triathlon in Palm Springs. The winner of the race was going to be taken anywhere along the West Coast by the two losers. So everybody was training very hard. And the night of the race, when we're getting ready to leave San Diego and travel about 2 hours to Palm Springs, I get a call from the two other participants, and they say, we can't do it. We're not ready. Let's do the next race, 4 months later. And so I almost decided to, can the whole idea and not go, but something told me to go. Something said, go, do the race anyway. It's good practice. You've been training hard. So I called up my training partner, and we drove to Palm Springs. Now, they expected about 500 people for the race. And when I got to the registration table, there was about 1,000 people. So they had to divide the race into two sections. They would release 500 people. About 45 minutes to an hour later, they'd start the second group, and then everybody would be timed in that way. So I was standing by the registration table, and I asked the cadet how long before my group goes. He said, oh, you have about 15, 20 minutes. And the moment he said that, they shot the gun off. And that was my group. So I ran 3/4 of a mile around the lake, jumped in the water, and tried to catch up. And
the first stage is swimming at the triathlon.
First stage is swimming. So I did my best to catch up, got out of the water, and the biking portion was probably my strongest event. So I got on my bike, and I started to try to make up time, and was pretty much pulled out all the stops, went for it, using my reserve right away. And so I was about 10 miles into the race, and I was coming to a corner, and there was a cadet standing facing me, and he was waving me on to make this turn. And there were two bikers on the corner that I was coming around to pass, and he was waving me like this. Well, what I didn't know that there was traffic on this road, and he was telling me to just keep going, and as I made the turn and passed these two bikers, here comes a four-wheel drive vehicle from behind, eats my bicycle and then tries to eat me. Yeah. And so I got catapulted out of my bike and landed pretty hard on the ground. And the moment I landed on the ground, I knew I was in trouble. And so they took me to the hospital and went through a series of CAT scans and x-rays, and found out that I had broken 6 vertebrae in my spine. And when you land really hard on your butt, the weight of the compression from the force takes vertebrae that are columns and it pancakes them. So the vertebrae were compressed, and the very top one, from the way I landed, was the most compressed. It was more than 60% compressed. And if you take a volume of mass and you flatten it, the matter's got to go somewhere. So the bone fragments went back on my spinal cord, and the arch that contained the spinal cord was fractured also. And so we went through 2 different opinions in Palm Springs there.
But how did you actually feel? You were lying in the hospital, and you were very fit, you were quite successful with your own chiropractic practice. How were you feeling? You must have been pretty devastated. I knew something was dramatically wrong first. And secondly, I knew that I couldn't go on business as usual. Excruciating pain. My body had been in the hospital
for quite a amount of time, and I had already physically exerted myself quite a bit. So my body was involuntarily convulsing, and it took me hours to get through the CAT scan because I was moving, and it was quite an unusual thing for the technicians. So when they showed me the X-rays and they showed me that I had compression fractures, I wasn't too worried about it until they showed me that one vertebrae and they showed me the bone fragments on the spinal cord, and I was in incredible pain and a lot of sensory changes going on in my body. So the recommendation at the time was a radical surgery called Harrington rod surgery.
Because obviously you knew exactly what was going on because it's your profession.
Right, and I had seen several Harrington rod surgeries, and basically what they do is they make a long incision along the spine. They put these stainless steel rods mounted to the backs of the vertebrae, but they cut off the whole entire back sides of the vertebrae, and they screw these long stainless steel rods in there, and then they take bone fragments from your hip and they paste it over the top and they hope for the best. Well, the purpose of those is to stabilize those bone fragments. So my Harrington rods would go from the base of my neck to the base of my spine. It would cover pretty much my whole entire spine. And after I got the first opinion, I thought, well, there's got to be another way. So then we called in a neurosurgeon after the orthopedic surgeon left, and he pretty much said the same exact thing as the first surgeon. So I went, one of my friends came from Hawaii and sat with me, and we said, we got to move to San Diego, back to where I live. So we went to Scripps Hospital and immediately met by another surgeon who said, he was one of those guys that was handsome together. He was the hospital director, medical director, and he was adamant. He said, we have to get you on the operating table today. And the reason being is the longer you wait, the body starts doing the healing process, and the strings of calcium fibers start to form to mend the broken bones. And he said, listen, and I said, whoa, I can't rush into this. He said, listen, you have about 24 to 48 hours to make your decision. If you wait too long, then we have to do a radical surgery where we cut you open from the front and the back. And he said, I don't recommend that because it's a high mortality rate. So, I think the worst of human suffering is indecision. When you don't know.
Absolutely, you don't know what to do.
So all my friends were there, and there were physicians and alternative health practitioners and acupuncturists, nutritionists, chiropractors, medical physicians. And they were all standing around the table with me, and when you're in trouble when your friends pat you on the shoulder and they say, we know you'll make the right choice. Because what that really translates into is, I'm so glad I'm not you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they all, filed out of the room, and as I sat there, I thought...
So you're literally completely alone with making this decision then?
Yeah, I was alone.
Yeah.
And so I started to think about living with a stainless steel rod in my spine, probably living in pain, and spending the rest of my life trying, to get off medications to take the pain away. So I thought, well, maybe one more opinion from one more surgeon. So the next day, another surgeon comes in, and he says, look, we don't have to put 12-inch stainless steel rods in your spine. We can put 8-inch stainless steel rods in your spine, and we can keep them in for a year, and we can take them out and put 4-inch stainless steel rods in your spine. And this man was a gigantic man. He was about 6'2" or 6'3", and he was probably 300 pounds. And I said to him, well, Doc, don't you think that those stainless steel rods would limit mobility in my thoracic spine? And he looked at me and he said, don't worry, there's no mobility in your thoracic spine. The moment he said that, it just caught my attention, because I had been teaching yoga and martial arts for many years in Southern California, and I had a lot of movement in my thoracic spine. And I looked at him and I saw that he had no movement in his thoracic spine. And in that moment, I realized that I probably knew as much about the spine as he did.